The past 6 months has brought a stream of bad news for China's economy: slow growth, record youth unemployment, low foreign investment, weak exports and currency, and a property sector in crisis. U.S. President Joe Biden described the world's second-largest economy as a ticking time bomb, predicting growing discontent in the country. China's leader Xi Jinping hit back, defending the strong resilience, tremendous potential and great vitality of the economy. So who is right, Mr. Biden or Mr. Xi? As is often the case, the answer probably lies somewhere in between. While the economy is unlikely to implode anytime soon, China faces huge, deep-rooted challenges. This made no sense. No sense at all, says Antonio Fadas, professor of economics at the business school INSEAD in Singapore. For 2 decades, the sector boomed as developers rode a wave of privatization. But crisis struck in 2020. A global pandemic and a shrinking population at home are not good ingredients for a program of relentless housebuilding. The government, fearing a US-style 2008 meltdown, then put limits on how much developers could borrow. Soon they owed billions they could not pay back. Now demand for houses has slumped and property prices have plunged. This has made Chinese homeowners emerging from 3 years of tough coronavirus restrictions poorer. In China, property is effectively your savings, says Alicia Garcia Herrero, chief Asia economist at wealth management firm Natixis. Until recently, it seemed better than putting your money into the crazy stock market or a bank account with low interest rates. It means that, unlike in Western countries, there has been no post-pandemic spending boom or major economic bounce back. There was this notion that Chinese people would spend like crazy after zero COVID, Ms. Garcia Herrero says. They'd travel, go to Paris, buy the Eiffel Tower. But actually they knew their savings were getting hammered by the fall in house prices, so they've decided to keep hold of what cash they have. Not only has this situation made households feel poorer, it has worsened the debt problems faced by the country's local governments. It is estimated that more than a third of their multi-billion-dollar revenues come from selling land to developers, which are now in crisis. According to some economists, it will take years for this property pain to subside. The property crisis also highlights problems in the way China's economy functions. The country's astonishing growth in the past 30 years was propelled by building everything from roads, bridges and train lines to factories, airports and houses. It is the responsibility of local governments to carry this out. However, some economists argue this approach is starting to run out of road. Figuratively and literally, one of the more bizarre examples of China's addiction to building can be found in Yunnan province, near the border with Myanmar. This year, officials there bafflingly confirmed they would go ahead with plans to build a new multi-million-dollar COVID-19 quarantine facility. Heavily indebted local governments are under so much pressure that this year some were reportedly found to be selling land to themselves to fund building programs. The bottom line is that there is only so much China can build before it starts becoming a waste of money. The country needs to find another way of generating prosperity for its people. We're at an inflection point, Professor Fadas says. The old model is not working, but in order to change focus you need serious structural and institutional reforms. For example, he argues, if China wanted a financial sector to fire up its economy and rival the US or Europe, the government would first need to loosen regulation considerably, ceding large amounts of power to private interests. In reality, the opposite has happened. The Chinese government has tightened its grip on the finance sector, scolded, westernized bankers for their hedonism and cracked down on big technology firms like Alibaba. One way this has been reflected is in youth unemployment. Across China, millions of well-educated graduates are struggling to find decent white-collar jobs in urban areas. In July, figures showed a record 21.3% of job seekers between the ages of 16 and 25 were out of work. The following month, officials announced they would stop publishing the figures. According to Professor Fadas, it is testament to a rigid, centralized economy, struggling to absorb such a high number of people into the labor force. A top-down system is effective when you want to build a new bridge, but looks cumbersome when the bridge has already been built and people are still looking for work. Western economies tend to be powered by people spending, but Beijing is wary of this consumerist model. Not only is it deemed wasteful, it is also individualistic. Empowering consumers to buy a new TV, subscribe to streaming services or go on holiday may help stimulate the economy, but it does little for China's national security or its competition with the US. Essentially, Mr. Xi wants growth, but not for the sake of it. This may be behind the recent boom in cutting-edge industries, such as semiconductors, artificial intelligence and green technology, all of which keep China globally competitive and make it less reliant on others. This idea might also explain the government's limited response to the faltering economy. So far it has only tweaked around the edges, easing borrowing limits or shaving a fraction off interest rates rather than pumping in large amounts of money. Foreign investors in China are worried and want the government to take action quickly, but those in charge seem to be playing the long game. They know that, on paper, China still has massive potential for more growth. It may be an economic powerhouse, but average annual income is still only $12,850. Almost 40% of people still live in rural areas.